episode 45. Hello, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff, and I'll be your host as we listen to eyewitness encounters involving one of the most terrifying cryptids, dogmen. Before I bring on tonight's guest, I want to send a shout out to Bill Hall, who's a scoutmaster for Boy Scout Troop Number 55 based out of Oklahoma City. It turns out Bill and the guys are at summer camp right now at a place called Kerr Scout Ranch at Slippery Falls. Hope you guys have a great time at summer camp, and thanks so much for listening to the show. Our guest tonight is Billy King from New York. Billy, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks a lot, Vic. Really glad to be here.
Billy, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
My name's Billy King. I'm in my early 20s. I was born in Pakistan but raised in America. I came here when I was about 4 months old, so I was practically born and raised here. I'm from the New York City metro area, maybe about 15 minutes away from Midtown. Throughout middle school and up until high school, I played soccer and I wrestled as well. I got into more combat sports like, MMA and boxing once I was in high school. Ever since then, I've been practicing training whenever I get the chance. I guess you could say I'm in pretty good shape. I could be in better shape, but, everybody can be in better shape. So I'm not really used to the wild or the woods. Over here where I live, it's really heavily, densely populated, and we're not really used to seeing wildlife like deer and stuff. We're not used to seeing them, and especially like other animals like coyotes. Like a few weeks ago in New York City, a few coyotes were spotted in uptown Manhattan, and people started freaking out just because, we're just not used to it. We're not used to seeing this kind of wildlife. We're unconditioned to it. So it's just the way we're raised over here. This past weekend, I actually went on a camping trip up into the Poconos in Pennsylvania, in northeastern Pennsylvania. It was like a completely new experience because this was the second time I've gone camping ever since what happened to me the first time I've gone camping. So it was just a completely new environment. It was hard for me to imagine how people live like this. Country roads, all this, houses were widespread, thick forests. There were deer walking on our lawn in the morning. People really didn't care. It was something out of the ordinary for them. So, it was just eye-opening experience seeing this country lifestyle, especially up in the mountains, so close to New York City. It was actually very eye-opening. I think, it's quite fantastic. Yeah, that's, I guess, a brief bio of who I am.
Since the outdoors is so alien to what you're used to, being in and around the Big Apple like you have been and are, what motivated you to go out and decide to go for a camping trip?
I'm always up for a good time. So the first time it happened, it was to celebrate the end of our freshman year of college. This time it was just to, celebrate the end of another very tough semester. So it was just we were looking for a good time away from technology and everything else was the main reason why we decided to go camping. So I guess that's what we did the first time, 2 years ago. And now this past weekend, we just wanted to get away from technology. We just wanted to relax, enjoy ourselves, go back to our roots.
You always seem to want what you can't have, and when you live in a heavily populated metropolitan area like that, I guess that would make sense that being able to get out and away from it all would be ideal.
After seeing this kind of relaxed lifestyle, I kind of want to live that lifestyle once I'm older, you know what I mean? It's just, it's so calm, it's relaxed, it's enjoyable.
After having experienced what it's like to be out there, you're thinking about maybe moving out into the sticks after you graduate and get a job and everything then, I take it?
Not really into the sticks, maybe into the suburban area, maybe on the edge of the sticks. After the experience I've had, I don't want to get too close to the sticks. But a rural type area, I'm completely fine with it now after seeing the kind of lifestyle, because Where I live, everyone's in a rush. Everyone's busy. Everyone's got something to do. And, we get so caught up with our own problems, we forget the world around us. So, I honestly used to think, when I was younger, that there was nothing outside of the world besides New York City. Everything else was, alien. But now I can relate to it because I've experienced this whole other lifestyle.
Growing up there in New York, did you believe in Bigfoot and other cryptids like that, or what?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm also a biology major, so I understand the biodiversity of this planet. Science says we haven't discovered a vast majority of species, and I think it's completely plausible to think that something like an 8-foot humanoid ape is out there in the Pacific Northeast or other parts of the world. Because, Bigfoot or Sasquatch is not exclusive to North America. My parents are from Pakistan, and they tell me in the northern areas there's something like that as well, and the steep mountains. So, growing up, I definitely believe that there's something out there. I actually liked reading these Bigfoot stories. I thought they were interesting. I thought they were entertaining. And all these cryptids and stuff, I can say for sure a lot of them perhaps are real, but we need further evidence to prove them. But Bigfoot, specifically, I think there's enough evidence to prove that it is an actual living thing.
It's hard to believe how widespread a lot of these cryptids are.
Yeah, I actually have a story myself. My mother, she was a chef a few years ago until, she decided to retire. One of her colleagues was also he was from the northern areas of Pakistan. The area up north is actually called the Northern Territory. It's very sparsely populated, very mountainous, very rugged terrain, but it's very beautiful up there. One of the Mughal emperors, he said that if he had seen heaven on earth, it would have been that region, Kashmir and the northern regions of Pakistan. Completely beautiful, but they're also very isolated, very far away from the rest of the world. So my mom's friend, his brother was a shepherd up there in the northern hills. So, one day he's herding his sheep and goats, and he's near a cliff, and he hears this loud scream, like a wailing. He looks over, and he sees a Bigfoot type ape hominid trying to steal one of his lambs. People over there, they take pride in what they own, and they're armed as well to protect themselves, similarly to how people over here have concealed carry. Over there, a lot of people have concealed carry as well, especially up north in the wild sticks and everything where there's bears, wolves. So he gets angry at this thing that's trying to steal his goat, and he takes a shot at it. The bullet hits the hominid in the shoulder, and he freaks out. It looks at him with a wild look in his eyes. At that point, he knew he was about to face it. After that, he keeps firing at him, and the ape hominid keeps going closer and closer to the cliff with each shot. Eventually, I think it was the last shot, and then the thing fell over off the cliff, and it was screaming like a terrible, ear-cracking scream. It fell hundreds of feet into the bottom of the valley. That's the Bigfoot story I have. But up north, they're called Barmanu. In the northern languages, it just means wild man or hairy man.
It sure is hard to believe how widespread these things are, but I guess just like Dogman, they pop up in places you'd never expect them to be. Now, moving on to your encounter here, Billy, tell us about the place where you had this encounter.
This was in the Adirondack regions of New York. It's all the way up north. It's a vast region. It's massive. It's heavily forested. It's pristine, untouched. A big chunk of the land is just a state park where there are no, settled populations of people, where there are no towns or villages or anything. At the time, I was going to Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York. The Adirondacks were about 5 hours from there. I guess the closest big city to us was Syracuse, and we were probably about 2.5 hours away from Syracuse. We were in the sticks. We were deep in the woods. The closest town to where we were was probably about a 15-mile drive, maybe a 15-mile country drive on the country roads. So it was quite far away from actual civilization.
All right, Billy, it's time to talk about the encounter that you had. Please take it from the top, starting with a chain of events that led you to being at the site of your encounter, all the way through you getting home and telling whoever you told about your encounter.
At the time, I was a freshman student at the Rochester Institute of Technology. A bunch of friends and I, we decided to get together at the end of the quarter. At the time, Rochester had a quarter system. This was the third quarter. Everybody was about to go home for the summer. We decided to stay a few more weeks in Rochester, hang out a little bit more. So one of my friends had the idea, let's go camping up in the Adirondacks. He was actually from the Syracuse area. He told us he'd gone there many times before. So we're like, that's fine with us. Let's do it. And it's maybe about, I would say, roughly 20 of us. We had a few large tents. It was about 5 cars. There were a lot of us. Just my whole floor. We had become so tight knit. We were like family. So we drove about 2.5 hours past Syracuse. It was about 5-hour total drive from where we were. We were in the middle of the sticks, middle of nowhere. We were going to stay there for 2 days. 2 days and 2 nights. This was the second night. This was the night we were having the most fun. We were singing songs. We were playing music. We were just reminiscing about this first semester for all of us. So at the time, I had a girlfriend, and we were not really getting along too well. I guess because whenever exams come along, I become isolated from everything. I like to draw myself away from friends and family or distractions. I guess she was upset about the fact she hadn't seen me in so long because of my preparations for the finals. So she got into an argument with me. I was upset. I wanted to go clear my head, and I went out for a walk. So because that's the best way I thought I could clear my head at the moment, get away from everybody else, and just relax, take a walk, maybe let my blood pressure drop down a little bit because my heart was racing. I was angry. So I go out for a walk. It was kind of hilly area, but not too mountainous. We were right off of a known trail in that area. I walked maybe more than a quarter mile, but less than a half mile. So I guess you could say I walked about a third of a mile. And down the trail, it was roughly around 11 o'clock at night, maybe 12. The stars were out, the moon was shining. Another thing that fascinated me, because we have so much light pollution where I live, you can see all the stars up there. It's just, the whole sky was filled with stars, dotted with them. So, I was fascinated by that. I was looking up at the stars, gazing at them. I'm walking, and I look over into this little valley, this little gorge thing, I guess you could say. And, the moon was shining in some of the areas, and then the trees were so tall that they were shadowing the light coming from the moon could pierce through the tree branches or whatever. When I look down, I'm looking down from maybe about 100 yards, maybe 150 at most. I'm looking downhill, so I can't really say how close or how far it was. I see this thing is leaning on a tree. I can see it clearly, maybe about 2 to 3 meters away. I can see 2 more things. We'll get back to that in a second. So when I look over, this thing's leaning on a tree, and I'm like, wow, what is this? I'm fascinated because I haven't seen an animal yet. In when we were staying camping, we just saw bugs here and there. But I'm looking at it, I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. What is this thing? And then when I started to look closer and started to observe it, I knew what. It just clicked in my head. I'm like, this is not something we're used to seeing. This is not something known. It was about 7 to 8 feet tall. From what I can tell, it was very muscularly built. It was a Dogman from after I researched about it. The legs were facing backwards, kind of like a dog's, exactly like a dog's actually, to be exact. And the one thing about the legs were that they were very muscular. The quadriceps, the hamstrings, they were so muscular and lean that you can see each individual muscle. That's how lean it was. It practically had no fat on it. It had a tapered waist, a broad chest. Its arms were long. It had hands, not hands, you could say paws, but it had, at the end of the paws, it had claws at the end. They were big. You can see them. I could see them from far away. And I guess like it was easier to see it because this thing was right in the moonlight. It looked like he was leaning over, stretching, I guess, on this tall oak tree. So, when I looked up at the head region, it just hit me that this thing was something we don't know about. It looked like a wolf. It had the entire face of a wolf, but the proportions were larger. It had thick fur. It had pointed ears, like a wolf or a German Shepherd, and it had a long snout. At the end of the snout was a black nose like any other dog or wolf. The fur was thick, but also thick in certain areas. It was like a grayish, blackish color in between. It wasn't jet black, and it wasn't like dull gray. It was right in the middle. And from what I can tell, I could only see part of its tail, but its tail looked thick. It looked thick. It looked like it was bushy. So I'm just sitting there fascinated, looking at it, and I look over maybe 2-3 meters away. These things were in the shadows, but they were significantly smaller than the upright canine, the Dogman. These things were significantly smaller. They were in the shadows. I could see their outline. They weren't standing on two legs. They were kind of like lying down, relaxing. As I was noticing it, I'm just entranced by what I was seeing. I'm pretty sure he didn't notice me because I was far away from him uphill. So I stepped on a twig when I wanted to get closer, like another foot or two. I wanted to get closer to have a better look at this thing, to confirm it, what I was looking at, that I was looking at an upright canine. When I saw him, the first thing that clicked in my mind was werewolf. These things are true. These things are real. I'm looking at a werewolf. I wanted to get closer, and I stepped on a branch. I made a crack, and that area was quiet. One of your earlier interviewers said that he was out hunting or something like that. He had seen a Dogman, and he said that whenever a predator enters a space, it was dead quiet. There was nothing going on. There was no rustling. There was no wind. There was nothing. It was dead quiet. When I stepped on a branch, that branch or twig made such a loud noise that this thing looked over. He looked out over at me, and when I saw his eyes, I knew that this thing was pure evil. When he looked over, he had like this amber glow, this dark yellow, amberish, golden glow in his eyes. His eyes, when they say your eyes are the gateway or the window to the soul, that's completely true. When I saw his eyes, they looked like you can tell that there was intelligence behind them, but you can also tell that there was a malevolence, there was a cunning, there was something evil about them, about his eyes. There was something evil in his eyes when he looked over. When he looked over, I locked eyes with him for a good 2 seconds before my fight or flight instinct kicked in, and then I just got the out of there. I ran as fast as I could. Like I said earlier, I'd been playing soccer since middle school for a good 7-8 years, and I was also wrestling. In wrestling, we're supposed to be as fit as we possibly can. Same thing with soccer. We're supposed to be able to run as long as we can and manipulate our runs. We're supposed to have short, bursts of pure power where we can sprint 200, 300, 400 yards if we need to. So, my fight or flight kicked in, the adrenaline was pumping, and I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins, and I got the out of there. I ran as fast as I could down that trail. The trail wasn't really that rocky or whatever. It was kind of flat, but I was running in flip-flops. I wasn't running in shoes or anything. I was just wearing flip-flops, a pair of cargo shorts, and a t-shirt, and I just wanted to get the out of there. I ran as fast as I could back to my camp. Within a minute, I got back to my camp. I was breathing very heavily, and my friends noticed. They'd asked me what happened. I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want them to think I was hallucinating or like I was doing some sort of drugs or whatever. So I just told them, I went down the trail. I thought I got lost, so I ran back down as fast as I could. And I ran towards the music. I ran towards the lights, the campfire. So that's what I explained to him. I just got nervous and I ran back as fast as I could. So I'm sitting there. When I get there, I just want to be away from people. I forgot to mention this earlier. While I was running, I started praying in my heart. I was raised in a devout Muslim household, and we're taught, like, if you ever come across something that frightens you, something that scares you, you'd read the surah. Surah just means, in Arabic, it just means verse. And it's called Ayatul Kursi, which is from Arabic to English, which just means the verse of the throne. It talks about the throne of God. So, I'm starting to read this in my heart, Ayatul Kursi, and they say, like, it's supposed to help ease your heart. It's supposed to help make difficulties you're going through bearable. So I started reading this prayer in my heart, this supplication, when I'm running down the trail. When I finally got back, I wanted to be left alone. I wanted to, like, go to sleep, relax, sleep it off. So I go back into my tent. My girlfriend wanted to say something, but I said, sorry, I just don't want to talk right now. And I went to sleep. I didn't fall asleep easily. It took me about an hour and a half to fall asleep, but I guess the adrenaline wore off and, like, my body was sore from the quick run and under those heavy, like, stressful conditions. So I got back into my tent. I went to sleep. Right before I went to sleep, I read the prayer again to help ease my heart, to help relax, to help make it easier. I fall asleep. Next morning we wake up and we start packing it up already, and we head out. I didn't really tell anybody anything. We were sitting in the car on our way back to Rochester. I was going to go home in about 2 days, going to take the train back home. I didn't tell anybody anything. I just kept it to myself. When I got back to Rochester, I started to look it up. I punched into Google exactly what I saw. What I came across was the Michigan dog van. The descriptions of what I read were exactly what I saw. So I just kept it to myself. I didn't tell anybody at the time. When the next semester started, I still hadn't told anyone. I opened up to a few friends, my best friends Peter and Adrian. I told them, and Zach as well. 3 friends of mine. They were there with me on the trip. I told them what I saw. They were very supportive. They comforted me. I guess they understood. That third semester at RIT, my sophomore year, my first semester, I actually transferred out back to a school in the New York City metro area. That was due to the fact, like, Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT, was becoming so much more expensive than I had originally planned I could afford. So I came back to New York City. Once I was back, I guess after opening up to my friends, I was more open about it. I accepted what I saw. And I told my brother and my cousin. They were very supportive. When I told them, what clicked off in their head was jinn. And that's what clicked off in my head when I was there as well. Being raised as Muslims, we're taught, like, there are 3 sentient beings that we know of. There's the angels, there are humans, and then there are jinns. Jinns live in parallel, what we now say are parallel dimensions. They live at a higher plane, and they can travel in between our dimensions because they're on a higher dimension. And it says in the Quran that they can shift their shapes. The Prophet Muhammad once said, like, they take the form of dogs, and they take the form of snakes. And they live they live on Earth, but on a different dimension. But they live in areas where people don't live. They don't like to be near people. They like to be isolated. So, like, it says deserts, mountains, forests. That's what the Prophet Muhammad said. That's where they lived. So that's what my brother and my cousin say I saw. So they're telling me, it's a jinn. But this thing, I don't think it was a jinn. After looking it up and researching it myself, I think this thing is an actual animal. It's not like it's not a human. It's not a jinn, and it's definitely not an angel. It's something else. It's an unknown animal. And that's what I saw, I can't say anything other than what I saw.
It seems like when an eyewitness is upset and out in the environment, for whatever reason, that seems to increase the chances of a dogman encounter happening.
Definitely, I came across your show on my YouTube suggestion. I was listening to this other radio show. They were talking about Dogman, and I just started putting Dogman onto YouTube search, and I found your channel from listening to more than 10, 12 interviews of you with other people. It does seem like a trend where people who are either going through some bold emotions, some tough emotions, or they're going through something stressful, that's when they see it. That's when they see this Dogman.
Yeah, it sure seems that way. Either fear or anger seems to bring on the encounters for whatever reason. I've got some questions for you about that encounter you just told us about. Are you open to the possibility that maybe the dogmen were closer than 100 yards? The reason why I ask that is you mentioned the dappled color of its coat. You said it looked to be kind of blackish in areas and also maybe timberwolf grayish in other areas. With the way colors are washed out by moonlight, I'm thinking that you had to have been closer than 100 yards to that subject to have a chance at seeing the different colors in its coat.
That probably was closer. I'm not really that good of a judge on distance. I can't really tell you accurately. But I guess, thinking about it now, seeing how, I saw his colors, I saw his eyes, and I saw, his features. Thinking back on it now, I was probably closer than 100 yards.
You must have been. To see any kind of a color variation like that, you had to have been probably closer to 80 yards or closer in than that. Now, you mentioned stepping on that twig or stick and snapping it. That brought its attention on you. At that very moment, were you ready to pull out a shovel and bury yourself on the spot or what?
When I looked over at him, when he locked eyes with me, it was as almost as time froze for a good 2 seconds. Those 2 seconds felt extremely long to me. When he looked over and I could see his eyes and I could see his maliciousness. When I get nervous, I think to myself in my native language in Punjabi. So I'm thinking to myself, Bilal, aj tera kam ho gaya. Aj tera kam ho gaya. Bilkul tu aj nahi bach se. Which basically translates to, today you're done. This is your day. You're done after this. You are not going to make it out alive. And then I just snapped around and I ran as fast as I could. While I was running, like I said earlier, I was reading that prayer in my heart, that supplication to keep that thing away from me. I don't know if he ever chased after me or he just left me. I know I wasn't followed because I didn't hear anything behind me. When he looked over, I actually thought I was going to die that day.
Well, I can certainly understand why when you see something like that, and when they turn and look at you because you stepped on that twig. That's straight out of a nightmare. I can't tell you how many nightmares I've had like that, where I was hiding someplace, looking at something like that was scary, and then for whatever reason, I stepped on a stick or a twig, and when it snapped, they looked right at me. That's awful.
I wouldn't wish this upon my worst enemy. It's such a traumatic experience. It's such a terrifying thing to see that I would not want to wish this on anyone else.
Well, that's just because you're a good person. That would be a horrible way to go out. One thing I'm also wondering about is, how could you go back to camp and not share the danger that was out there with the other people in camp?
When I saw him at first, I honestly thought it was a jinn. When I got back to my camp, I was thinking over what I just saw, and I honestly thought it was a jinn. I just was so terrified I didn't want to tell anybody else. It's when you see something that traumatic, it's it freezes you. I couldn't talk. When my girlfriend wanted to talk to me, I barely said I'm not in the mood. I barely pushed that out of my mouth. And there were about 20 of us. We had all our cars. It was brightly lit. We had taken full advantage of the situation. We had 3 or 4 campfires going on. We had loud music playing. So I guess I felt like as if this thing probably wouldn't want to come near us anyways because all of this what was going on. So I guess that's why I didn't tell anybody. Looking back on it now, that might have been a stupid idea because if that thing had followed me back and seen all of us and had decided to hurt someone, I'd feel like I was personally responsible for what happened because I didn't warn anybody. I didn't take the steps to protect everyone I could.
That was going to be my next question. I was going to ask you if you ever did feel any guilt about not sharing that danger with the people in camp, but you just answered that question for me. Were you counting on your belief in God to protect you when you were laying in that tent with those super thin fabric walls?
Yeah, it says in the Quran that when man is in distress, when the son of Adam is in distress, and he calls upon God, God always answers. God always protects. He answers those who call on him, even if they call on him the first time in their life. Even if they've ignored God their whole life, but they call on him in that moment of stress, in that moment of danger, he'll answer them, he'll turn to them. So this Ayatul Kursi, my mother had taught me when I was younger that before you go to sleep, you just read it 3 times and just relax and you can go to sleep. Don't worry because the angels come down and protect you. So while I was sitting there, I was thinking about my faith in God. I was thinking about God and how I knew he would protect me. So I guess you could say he had protected me that night because whatever that thing was, if he wanted to come after us, it could have easily come after us.
Yeah, someone or something was definitely looking over you that night, to say the least. Now, having had that encounter, do you still go out into the woods and not worry yourself to death? What's it like for you now?
Well, after the thing happened, I stayed away from the woods. I wouldn't travel alone at night. There's a saying by the Prophet Muhammad. He said, if he knew the things I knew, you would never travel alone at night. After experiencing what I experienced with my whole heart, I believe in it fully. I tried to avoid the woods at night. I have never gone back to Adirondacks. I don't plan on going back to that area. I just came back from the Poconos, but that area is known for vacations, for vacation homes, for families. It's a family area. There were a lot of people around me. I wasn't too nervous when I went there. But the only way you can convince me to go back to the Adirondacks or that area is if I was armed. That's the only way you can convince me to go back. If I was armed and I had my weapon on me at all times. That's the only way I'd go back. And with a group of people, I would never go by myself.
If you ever do go back into that area or any other area that might have dogmen, don't rely on the ability of that firearm to protect you all that much. For whatever reason, even powerful firearms don't seem to be all that effective against them. That's something I never will understand. Have you heard about those stories where people have tried shooting at them before with very little success?
Yeah, I think you told me somebody shot it with a 45-70. I know a decent amount about firearms, and a 45-70 is a bear round. A 45-70 can knock down a bear, can kill a grizzly with proper shot placement. You hear about these stories where people have shot Bigfoot, where they've supposedly killed Bigfoot, but this Dogman seems like it's stronger than a Bigfoot, it's stronger than a Sasquatch, more resilient. To firearms, to anything.
It sure does seem like when you encounter a dogman, you are much more likely to get injured than if you encountered a Bigfoot, unfortunately, so that's not a comforting thought to say the least. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to share with us, Billy?
Well, like you just said, more likely to get hurt when you see a dogman than a Sasquatch. I've listened to a lot of interviews with people who say they've encountered Sasquatch up close and personal. They always say Bigfoot has this almost human-like demeanor, but when listening to people describe Dogman, you can tell that this thing is malicious, it's demonic, it has ill will, it does not want good, it feeds off anger, because whenever people have mentioned they've seen it, they've always seen it angry, they've never seen it happy or in a good mood or whatever. They've always seen it angry. And to people out there who wish they could see this thing, who want an experience like this, I'm telling you, whoever you are, wherever you are, you do not want to see this thing. Don't go looking for it. Don't go looking for trouble when that's just not logical. It's not something you should do. Like Vic said earlier, there's no point in hunting it. You can't hunt it if it can't feel those bullets, it can't feel those arrows or whatever you're going to try to hit it with. I think the best thing to do is just acknowledge that these things are out there, educate yourself, and like I said, don't go into the woods alone at night. Have a group of people with you. Just don't go looking for this thing. If you listen to any of the interviews, there was a man in Australia, I believe, who had his heart ripped out or something along those lines. They're stronger than us, they're faster than us, and they know more about the wild than we do. Just don't go looking for trouble. Don't go looking for these things. It's not worth it.
That is something I will never understand. To me, it really shows a lack of understanding of what you're dealing with when you have people that tell me about how they would love to have an encounter with the Dogman. No, you wouldn't. You don't know what you're getting yourself into when you put yourself into that position. They sit back and listen to these various shows where people talk about how they ran into one and got away without a scratch. Well, that's not the whole story. Like I've said before, there are people who did not get away unscathed. I can't share those stories with you, but I have brought it to light that those incidents do happen. They don't seem to be all that frequent, but they do happen. Please remember that before you try to put yourself out in a situation where you might run into one of these things. Well, Billy, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show here, sharing the details of that encounter and everything.
Can I say one more thing before we wrap it up?
Sure, take your time.
To the people out there who have seen this Dogman and they haven't come out and told anybody about it yet, we're all here for you. Vic is here for you. You don't have to be alone anymore. When I saw it, I thought I was the only person that saw it. I started looking it up as soon as I could, and I found out, I'm not the only one. Once you find out that there are people who have gone through the same thing as you, it's like a weight is being lifted off your shoulders. And there is support for people like us out there who have come across it. You don't have to suffer alone. You can find closure to this entire thing. I found closure when I told my friends, my brother and my cousin. I found closure when I told them that, when they comforted me. And I found even more closure when I came across this radio show, when I spoke to Vic. So please, if you've had an encounter, reach out to someone who's open-minded. They'll just help you move on from this experience.
Thanks again so much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it.
All right, thanks a lot, Vic. I really appreciate your help. I really appreciate what you're doing for people like us. I wish you nothing but the best. And everybody out there, I'd really like to thank you for listening to my awful voice. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate your patience with me. Thank you.
Have yourself a great night, and always remember, I'll be here for you.
All right, thanks a lot, bro. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks again, and have a great night.
Goodbye.
Bye. If you've had a Dogman encounter and you'd like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear from you.